So this chapter 15 will focus on the resurgence of empire in East Asia, or basically its golden age. So, following the collapse of the Han Dynasty, regional kingdoms, or successor states, were constantly vying for each other for power for 350 years. However, in 589, a man named Yang Di managed to unify these regional kingdoms and create the Sui Dynasty. He orders massive building projects like the Qin Emperor, such as the Grand Canal, which was intended to promote trade between North and South China, and by linking a network of earlier canals. It was so successful that the amount of traffic going through it will not be surpassed until traffic on railroads in the 20th century. However, these large construction projects required a lot of conscripted labor, so this created a lot of white discontent. Didn't help the fact that the Sui Dynasty also suffered major military failures in Korea, further prompting rebellion. The emperor was assassinated in 618, and the Tang Dynasty is initiated. Tang Taizong, the second emperor of the Tang Dynasty, rules from 627 to 649, and he basically got to power by murdering two brothers, pushing aside his father. But he does prove a very competent emperor. He built the capital of Chang'an and imposed law and order. He managed to keep taxes and prices low, and he was more effective in implementing earlier Sui policies. One of the major achievements of the Tang Dynasty were in the field. Some of the major achievements of the Tang Dynasty were in transportation and communications. This included extensive postal and courier services, roads that allowed the entire empire to be reached in 8 days, low taxes and low banditry, an equal field system with 20% of the land being passed out, with only 20% of the land actually being owned by hereditary ownership, 80% of it being redistributed according to a formula, and this would work well into the 8th century. However, you did get corruption and the loss of land to Buddhist monasteries. You also had the Bureaucracy of Merit, with Imperial civil service examinations being expanded and reformed. You also had these examinations were centered around a Confucian educational curriculum. Of course, there were some bribery and nepotism, but for the most part, people advanced through merit. This built a loyalty base to the dynasty, and the system remained strong until the early 20th century with the fall of the Qing. The Tang Dynasty experienced one of the largest expansions of China in its history. As a result of their military conquest, they established tributary relationships with other kingdoms such as Manchuria, Korea, Vietnam, and Tibet. China would serve as the middle kingdom. All foreign visitors must engage in a elaborate prostration. Must engage in elaborate rituals, the kowtow ritual, to acknowledge their inferiority to the Chinese. So this is a map depicting the Sui Dynasty here, and then the Tang Dynasty extending all the way here. We can see that the Grand Canal, is here, which allowed for better trade. And also, we can see that the Tang Dynasty was greatly expanded China, with even Tibet being a Tang ally to the mid 7th century. Now, this a little kingdom.
Sorry.
So, sorry about that. That was an interruption. And one of the kingdoms that the Tang established a tributary relationship was with the Shilla kingdom of the Korean Peninsula. However, everything must eventually fall. The Tang Dynasty eventually suffered from governmental neglect, with the emperor being obsessed with music and a favorite concubine. Yeah, that's always great. And you get a rebellion in 775 under An Lushan, a former military commander. He was able to capture the Chang'an, but the rebellion was crushed, and the nomadic Turkish Uyghur mercenaries are invited to. However, in order to suppress the rebellion, the Tang invite nomadic Turkish Uyghur mercenaries to suppress the rebellion. And in exchange, these Uyghurs are allowed to sack Chang'an and Luoyang. Kind of reminds you almost of the Visigoths. Kind of reminds you of the Visigoths of Rome. The Tang Dynasty continues to decline, with rebellions in the 9th century and the last emperor abdicating in 907. However, very quickly after, you get the Song Dynasty. This dynasty was mainly focused on administration, industry, education, and the arts. They greatly expanded the merit system and paid well, and generally paid bureaucrats very well. It considered all state officials to be servants of the imperial government. However, the military was not emphasized nor trusted. Now, as you can imagine, with such a gigantic bureaucracy that you're paying so well, this causes a heavy drain on the economy. You have 2 peasant rebellions until the 12th century, and the internal inertia prevents reform of bureaucracy. Reminds you of anything? And additionally, because the Song Dynasty didn't really like the military, you often had a very incompetent civil service leadership, civil service force leading the military. This is not really surprising. The Song Dynasty's lack of military strength isn't surprising again when scholar bureaucrats lack military training, and thus the dynasty is unable to contain nomadic attacks. The Jurchen are able to conquer the north, forcing the Song Dynasty to relocate to Hongzong, southern China, there forming the Southern Song. So this is a map depicting, first initially the Song Dynasty. As you can see, it's a much more compact, smaller state than the Tang, and then eventually the Jin, and we still have the Grand Canal, but then we eventually see the Jin come here and just conquer Korea, Manchuria, and the Northern Song, plus the Song is forced to relocate to the south. Now, due to all this nice trade going on, due to all the trade going on between the various civilizations in East Asia, you managed to get the introduction of Vietnamese champa fast ripening rice to China. This rice, due to its fast ripening nature, could actually allow for 2 crop harvests per year. This leads to population growth as a result of the increased agricultural production and effective food distribution system. Urbanization. You also get the rise of urbanization, with Chang'an being the world's most populous city with 2 million residents. There's an increased emphasis on ancestor worship with elaborate grave rituals and extended family gatherings in honor of deceased ancestors. You also get the popularity of foot binding, which is basically when upper middle class and upper class Chinese would basically tie the feet of young girls, making them malforming them. Thus, when they grew up, these girls could not actually do anything, making them practically dependent on their husbands. This was basically a way of making sure the woman was under the control of the aristocrat of the upper class, and also B, the way the upper class is showing off their wealth, because the fact that they can afford to, completely destroy women's capabilities to work because they just have so much money. However, this foot binding practice wouldn't actually spread to lower classes because they need the woman to work. Hang on, sorry for that interruption. Sorry about that. That was a little interruption I had. Basically, foot binding increases control, and technology and industry really took off during this period, with porcelain or Chinaware being invented. An increase in coke-based you also had an increase in coke-based iron and steel production. By using, now you don't really need to know this, but just if you want to know, by using a process that allows the impurities of coal to be burned off, the carbon, by using a process that allows the impurities of coal to be burned off, While not allowing the carbon content of the coal to burn, the coal is turned into coke, which is much better for iron and steel production. Gunpowder is also invented by Daoist elixir mixers, and naval technology improves, especially with a compass, which would be a huge assistance to navigators and merchants. You also got the advent of woodblock printing and the movable type by the mid-11th century. However, the complex Chinese logosyllabic alphabet made simple woodblock techniques more useful. Ideographs, basically, think about it. Ideographs unite the babble of oral tongues, but can't leverage movable type like the Gutenberg press can. Letters of credit developed to deal with. Now, due to copper coin shortages, you had letters of credit being developed. You also got promissory notes and checks also being used, and the development of privately produced paper money. Of course, the fact that this is privately printed means that the money supply isn't very stable, which often led to riots when the promissory notes or letters of credit or money or the value in money wasn't exactly honored. In order to resolve this problem, the government claims monopoly on money production in the 11th century. Little factoid, an economy needs, just for future reference, an economy needs blood circulating like a body needs blood. After the collapse of the Han Dynasty, you got less confidence in Confucianism. As a result, just around the same time, Buddhism, Christianity, Manichaeism, and later Zoroastrianism and Islam appear. These become very popular with the clientele, primarily the foreign merchant class at first. However, Buddhism becomes increasingly more popular starting in Dunhuang along the Silk Road. You get an increasingly cosmopolitan nature of Chinese cities and some foreigners, actually. Buddhism was appealing to its high standards of morality, intellectual sophistication, promise of salvation, at least the Mahayana version, distributed food during and the fact that Buddhists often distribute food during famine from their rich monasteries. It also brought in useful imports of the cherry and refined sugar. However, Buddhism wouldn't always get along with the rest of contemporary Chinese culture. Buddhism, while emphasizing on metaphysics and ascetic ideals such as celibacy, and contemplative isolation, Confucianism emphasized ethics and politics and was family-centered. Basically, you should venerate your ancestors, and you must have plenty of children in order to actually continue your family line. So, in order to fit in, Buddhists got creative. They used Taoist terms. For example, they used Dharma. For example, they replaced Dharma with the word Tao, the way. They replaced Nirvana with Wu Wei of Tao, Wu Wei or non-competition, and they promised that if one son was sent to a monastery, salvation would be granted for 10 generations. This syncretic Buddhism of Chinese characteristics would spread very widely, with, for example, Chan or Zen Buddhism becoming quite Daoish. However, Buddhists are persecuted. Daoists and Confucians, the persecution of Buddhists by Daoists and Confucians would be supported by the late Tang Dynasty. In the 40s, the government begins systematically closing Buddhist temples and expelling Buddhists. They also do Zoroastrians, Christians, Manichaeans, and Manichaeans as well. However, they also had an economic motive. However, one of the major motives was economic. They could now seize the large monastic land holdings. The Song Dynasty would later refrain from persecuting Buddhists, but it would actually favor Confucians. The New Confucians were heavily influenced by Buddhist thought, and it created an enduring synthesis of practical worldly Confucianism with a touch of Buddhist and Platonic metaphysics. This would form the basis of a revised civil service exam that would influence all of East Asia. So the relationship between one of the relationships between China and the outside world would be between China and Korea. The Tang Dynasty's attack and then withdraw from the Shilla Dynasty in exchange after realizing that simply put, just constantly, suppressing them for warfare would just be too costly. In exchange, the Koreans recognized Tang as the Tang Emperor as the emperor. Technically, the Sui Dynasty was basically a vassal tributary state, but it made a high amount of independence. The Sui people could keep their own king, and the Chinese influence on Korean culture was pervasive, but the merit system never really got there. That would not exactly do Korea very well later on. The Vietnamese, in terms of Vietnam would adapt Chinese culture and technology. However, one of the major differences was that Vietnamese society was never as patriarchal. And so you also get an ongoing resentment on the part of the Vietnamese towards Chinese political domination. This becomes evident when they assert their independence when the Tang Dynasty falls in the 10th century. In terms of China and early Japan, the Tang/Song armies never really invaded Japan. However, Chinese culture was very pervasive. The Japanese imitated Tang administration, and they established a new capital in Nara, hence Nara, Japan, which lasted from 710 to 794 CE. The Japanese adopted Confucian and Buddhist teachings, yet retained the local religion Shintoism. During the Heian period of Japan, from 794 to 1185 CE, the Japanese emperor moves the court to Heian, or Kyoto. However, the emperor is merely a figurehead, with real power lying in the hands of the Fujiwara clan. This would become a pattern in Japanese history. The weak emperors would resign, but they don't actually do it. They don't actually have the power. This would explain the longevity. This would actually help explain the longevity of the Japanese imperial institution. To this day, Japan has been ruled. From around this period to this day, the Japanese have an imperial have only had one, and I mean one imperial dynasty. That is an impressive. That is a very impressive record of continuously keeping one single dynasty. So this is a picture depicting Heian court dress. As we can see, the males and females will wear very elaborate and beautiful robes. You also had extremely decorated and ornamented samurai swords. In terms of Heian culture, most literature reflected Chinese models and was written in Chinese, even though the Japanese language is very different from the Chinese language. Official court business was conducted and recorded in Chinese, like French and Norman England and Latin and the early Byzantine Empire. Even though the Japanese, even then, the Japanese syllabic script used some Chinese ideographs and characters. One of the world's first novels that actually came out from the Heian period. It's known as the Tale of Genji. It's written in Japanese, not Chinese, which was quite different from most of the other works of the time. It was written by a woman named Murasaki Shikubu, and described court life and subtle reflections on the melancholy of aging. Civil war breaks out between the Taira and Minamoto clans in the 12th century, with the Minamoto leader becoming shogun around 1185 CE, and they would rule from Kamakura. However, they allowed the imperial throne to continue in Kyoto. Medieval Japan consisted of two major periods: the Kamakura from 1185 to 1343 CE, and the Muromachi from 1346 to 1573 CE. They both decentralized power in the hands of the warlords, and Chinese influence ebbed in this feudal period. The military authority lied in the hands of the samurai, who were a professional warrior class, who really, the only other comparison you can really make are maybe European knights. And that is all. Thank you for listening.